Hi there. In this video, we're going to be learning a little bit about weaknesses, but I want to show you an endgame that I came across that I think you can learn a lot from. So let's take a look at these weaknesses thing. Okay, so here black takes back on d5, and as you can see, black has several weaknesses. The pawn on h6 is an isolated pawn, and the pawns on f7 and f6 are not only isolated, they're also doubled, which makes them extremely vulnerable and easy to attack. At the same time, those pawns are going to be pretty hard to defend. Okay, this is an awful position for black. Okay, and that's a typical example of what a weakness is in chess. Let's see other types of weaknesses. So let's see our next diagram. And as you can see here, there's a backward pawn on d6, and this pawn happens to be on a half-open file, which means that white's going to be able to put his rook there and attack the pawn. And because that pawn cannot be defended by other pawns, it's extremely vulnerable. Okay, black's going to have to defend it with pieces, but that's not the only problem. The d5 square is very weak also. It's what we call in chess an outpost, and white can put his knight there. It's going to be extremely difficult to dislodge. Okay, it's a very powerful knight. That knight is worth a rook or even more. It's a beautiful knight. Okay, so this position is just horrible for black because of the weakness on d5 and because of the backward pawn on d6. Okay, let's move on. Let's see other weaknesses. In this position, there are no pawn weaknesses. However, the diagonal, which goes from b3 to g8 itself, it's weak, and white can actually exploit this immediately. There are two ways to do it. The first one is bishop takes pawn, because after king takes, we have this beautiful checkmate, with the king not being able to go anywhere else. Okay, very nice checkmate. But that's not the only way. White could also try the quiet approach with queen to b3. Okay, piling up his bishop and queen on the same diagonal. f7 can only be defended by sacrificing the exchange with rook to f8. Unfortunately, black has no compensation for the sacrifice, and after bishop takes, queen takes, white has no weaknesses. This is a winning position for white. Let's move on. Okay, in this other position, it is true that the e5 square is very weak, and e6 is also a weak pawn, but unlike before, there's no half-open file here, so that makes it rather difficult to attack. So we wouldn't really say that e6 is a weak pawn in this position. However, the e5 square is, but that's not the only problem for black. He has another major problem, and that's his bishop. His bishop on c8 lacks mobility, and the reason is all the black pawns are fixed on white squares, and that means that bishop cannot move, well, basically anywhere. Okay, watch what a difference it would make if that bishop were a dark squared bishop. That'd be an awesome bishop now, very good bishop. Black would have no problems whatsoever. But with the bishop on c8, that's a major weakness. So as you can see, in this quick review, we've seen pawn weaknesses, we've seen square weaknesses, and we've seen pieces which are actually weak. Okay, but the issue of what a weakness is in chess is actually rather complex. Let's move on. Take a look at this position. It has been well established that in order to win an endgame, your opponent must have at least two weaknesses. Now, the first weakness for black, it's quite clear, is that pawn on c5. Why? Well, mainly because that pawn has the potential to become a queen, so that's obviously a weakness for black. But some people would find it rather difficult to understand where is the other weakness, where is black's second weakness, why is black losing this position if it's white to move? Okay, and I'd like you to think about that and give it some thought. Okay, this position is very simple. It's a well-known pawn ending where white wins easily. But, if you actually understand this ending, you'll open new doors in your understanding of weaknesses. Okay, where exactly lies black's second weakness? Okay, think about that. And meanwhile, let's move on, because I wanted to show you this beautiful endgame composition. It was composed in 1985 by a composition grandmaster called Joseph Krikeli from the Republic of Georgia. He was a wonderful composer. Unfortunately he passed away in 1988. It was a big loss for Georgian chess. Okay, but he left us some marvelous endgame compositions, and this is one of them. And it has to do a lot with two weaknesses, and also what exactly is a weakness in chess. Now, at first sight, Black's position is completely desperate because his king is so far away, and the pawn on f7. It's so easy to attack. White's only going to go king f5, king f6, and that pawn seems completely lost. What's Black going to do here? His king being so far away, 3 pieces against 2, White should win easily. But it turns out the things are actually not that simple. Okay, so it's White to move here. He does play king to f5. Now, the obvious threat is king to f6. Like if Black brings his king across, he has no time, king f6, and the pawn falls. Nothing he can do about it. But watch this, because Black now comes up with a very simple defense. Rook to e7. And the whole point is that when we go king to f6 now, he goes rook to e6, check. And now, as you can see, the pawn on e5 itself is also a weakness. So even though Black has 2 weaknesses, the pawn on f7 itself, and the king being so far away, not being able to defend his pawn, that's the second weakness. But White's got 1 weakness also. So 2 minus 1 equals 1. Is this enough to win? Can Black actually survive this ending, despite the fact that his king is so far away? I mean, it's 3 pieces against 2. White should be winning, shouldn't he? Well, let's see, because it's actually not that simple. The only way for White to make progress, it's a very nice move that we're going to see next, but if he tries something silly like, king here, the idea being, maybe coming to d5 and d6, Black's got a simple move, which is pawn there, check, and now the rook is lost. So that's obviously not a plan. Okay, that's not going to work. So how else is White going to make progress? Well, he's got a wonderful idea. He can actually defend his e-pawn sideways with rook to e5. Now, as you can see, that pawn is protected, and we are threatening king here, because rook e6 will no longer work. So if Black goes rook to d7 now, then rook to g7, and White wins. So he's only got 1 move now, rook to e6. And again, it seems as though White's not going to be able to make much progress. For example, if we go rook to g7, obviously he goes rook to e7. Again, king to f6 doesn't work. What else can we do? Yes, we do have check, king here. But again, if we come to f8 with the rook, he goes rook to e7. We bring our king to f6. Again, he delivers a check on e6. No progress is being made. But watch this, because now the position of that king is going to change everything. Rook to g7, and watch this, because the f-pawn is pinned. Okay, the rook is on the same rank as the king, and that's going to make a whole difference. When the rook goes to e7 now, we bring our king to f6, he delivers a check, only move, and then we take the pawn. Because after rook takes pawn, we have king to f6, discovered check, the king is in check, the rook is on. White wins thanks to this beautiful tactical idea. What a beautiful endgame. I love rook to g5. I love discovered check. It all works so nicely. That intermediate move, rook to g8, brings the king to b7, then rook to g7. I just love this ending. It's not very difficult, but it's so beautiful. Okay. Now, let's go back to the original position. When I found the answer to this puzzle, I started thinking, okay, but what would have happened if the Black king had been somewhere else? What if the Black king, I'm not talking about, the king being, in any of those squares, because obviously the king would be too close to the pawn and the draw would be very simple. But what if the king had been on a square like, I don't know, let's try a7. Well, a7 is simple because the same idea works again. And we have a discovered check. But how about b8, for example? Well, if the king is on b8, we cannot win. For example, king here, rook there, same idea. And now he simply brings the king closer to the pawn. So after king to f6, all he has to do is this move. White can't make any progress here. If he brings the rook down, well, he's just going to go rook check and bring his king to e7. And if we try, I don't know, a move like this, then black has different options. Like, for example, king here, rook check, king here, rook here, check. If we take the pawn, he takes on e5. If we retreat our king, then simply king to e7. But it turns out that, you know, with the king being so close to the pawn, black can actually afford to give up his pawn. Like check, king takes, and now king to d7. And as you can see, this pawn is under attack. White can only play waiting moves, and then we can simply go like this, check. If the king goes down, then simply check, we chase the king, so he must come up, check, come up, and now we have a typical Philidor position, which is a very easy draw. Check, king here. As you can see, the rook is watching so that the king doesn't get closer, and when the pawn advances and he really has no other way to make progress, then this rook has become passive because it's no longer doing anything, and we have to activate it again. And we can do that by simply going rook to a1. And now the rook will attack the king from behind, and white can make no progress whatsoever. So this position is a dead draw. Okay, that was simple enough. What if the king is somewhere else, like, say, a3? Okay, let's try it. King here, rook here. We try the same plan. And now we go rook here with the idea of rook to c4 and rook to c7. However, in this position, he simply plays king to b3, preventing rook to c4. For example, if rook to d4 now, rook to e7, and white's really not making much progress, like if rook here, rook to e6, then the king has to retreat, or if we go rook to d6, intending this, then we simply advance our king, the king goes up, and now we move the rook sideways. Okay, if white tries something funny like that, black will have time to attack the pawn on e5. No progress is being made. Now, I want to tell you that we've created a very nice group with over 500 members. It's a free group at Chess.com. Okay, the group is called Chess.clinic. And, you know, if you want to learn chess, it's not enough to watch some videos on the internet or study books. At some point, you're going to have to do some work on your own. So I'm inviting you to study this position. I'm going to give you a couple of puzzles now, and join us at the Chess.clinic group on Chess.com, because you know, lessons there, well, the things that we're doing there are free. There's lots of free material, online quizzes, PDF files that you can download absolutely free. Come and join us. Okay, and here are the puzzles. What happens if the king is on a2 with white to move? Okay, just think about it, just provide some variations, let us know your thoughts. And what happens if the king is on b1, g2, or h1? Think about all those possibilities and let's see what you can come up with. I assure you that if you actually do that kind of work, your understanding of not only just descending but many other endings will improve.
See the subscribe button? Hug it, show it some love. But above all, click it. And don't forget to visit our website, Chess.clinic.